It is afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. You know, we all know that Canadians are going through a cost of living crisis. Many are losing their jobs, and we're in a trade war with our largest partner south of the border. And just last week, the Parliamentary Budget Officer said that the Liberal numbers just don't add up. So we believe that Canadians deserve transparency, and that's why we are calling for the Liberals to table a budget before the House rises for the summer. But we disagree with the Conservative claim that it's government spending that causes inflation. In our view, it was corporate price gouging, the global disruption caused by the pandemic and supply chain disruptions that are the main drivers of inflation. And that's why we are going to be voting against the Conservative opposition motion today. Misdiagnosing the problem risks misdiagnosing the solutions. And if the Conservative motion is to be believed, then that will require cuts to the services Canadians need. We know the Conservatives want to cut dental care. They want to cut child care. They want to cut pharmacare. And we believe at this time that Canadians need more help, not less. So New Democrats believe that there should be a fiscally responsible budget tabled in this House, one that makes the necessary investments that Canadians need, and one that brings in fair taxation so that we can actually provide the solutions that Canadians do need, which is building the affordable homes that they need, fixing health care, and lowering the cost of living, including groceries and utilities that we know would make a big difference in Canadians' lives. So that's why we will be voting against the Conservative motion today.
Merci, Don. Bonjour tout le monde. Alors, on vit des temps qui sont difficiles. Il y a une crise du coût de la vie. Les gens ont de la difficulté à payer l'épicerie, à payer leur loyer également, leur maison. Et c'est pour ça que les Québécois et les Canadiens méritent la vérité. C'est pour ça que nous, au NPD, on est d'accord sur le fait que le gouvernement devrait déposer un budget d'ici la fin de la session parlementaire. C'est une question de transparence envers les citoyens et les citoyennes. Alors, là-dessus, on est d'accord. Par contre, on n'est pas d'accord avec la rhétorique des conservateurs qui disent que ce sont les dépenses publiques puis les programmes sociaux qui causent l'inflation et la hausse du coût de la vie. Et comme l'a très bien dit le leader du NPD, Don Davies, quand tu as un mauvais diagnostic de la situation, tu amènes des mauvaises solutions. Et c'est là où on est en désaccord avec la motion des conservateurs, puis on va s'y opposer, parce que ce que ça veut dire, en réalité, c'est des coupures dans les services à la population, dans les services aux gens. On sait que M. Carney veut faire des coupures dans les services publics, mais là, la motion conservatrice nous amène aussi à faire des coupures dans les services publics. Puis dans ces temps difficiles-là, les gens n'ont pas besoin de moins d'aide de la part du gouvernement fédéral, mais de davantage d'aide pour être capables de régler leurs problèmes de tous les jours. Alors, nous, ce qu'on va demander, c'est un budget responsable d'ici la fin de la session parlementaire, mais qui va préserver la capacité de l'État de faire les investissements nécessaires pour répondre aux besoins des gens, que ce soit le service de santé publique, des logements puis des appartements que les gens sont capables de se payer, mais aussi contrôler le coût du panier d'épicerie. Alors, c'est la position du NPD aujourd'hui.
M. Boulerice, vous parlez de logement notamment. Dans les rapports qui ont été dévoilés aujourd'hui par la vérificatrice générale, on apprend qu'il y a une réduction de moins de 2 % des espaces de bureaux qui a été faite, des espaces qui pourraient servir à du logement abordable. Qu'est-ce que ça vous dit?
Ça veut dire que les libéraux de M. Carney ne livrent pas la marchandise. Ça fait des mois qu'on nous dit qu'on va utiliser des bâtiments fédéraux pour avoir du logement réellement abordable, ou alors utiliser des terrains fédéraux pour bâtir du logement réellement abordable. Puis là, ce qu'on voit, c'est que l'éléphant a accouché d'une souris, puis ça ne répond pas du tout à la crise du logement actuel.
Sur le rapport de la BG, vous avez dit en réaction sur les F-35 que ce n'est plus la bonne option pour le Canada. Oui. Qu'est-ce que le gouvernement devrait faire maintenant? On se tourne vers d'autres options? Bien,
écoutez, on regarde la saga de ce programme-là depuis le début, puis on se pose la question, est-ce qu'il y a un pilote dans l'avion? Puis clairement, non, parce qu'il n'y a rien qui fonctionne. Le coût va doubler. Il n'y a pas de hangars qui sont prêts pour accueillir les appareils qui s'en viennent en 2026-2027. Il n'y a pas assez de pilotes qui sont formés. Et la construction de nouveaux hangars va encore ajouter à l'explosion des coûts. Donc, il y a des alternatives. Il y a d'autres choses qu'on peut regarder dans le monde, des produits européens, entre autres, des produits européens, suédois ou français, qui feraient en sorte aussi qu'on aurait la capacité puis la maîtrise de faire les mises à jour logicielles. Parce que rappelons-nous que les F-35, la mise à jour, elle reste au Texas, avec l'administration Trump en ce moment. si on avait des problèmes, on serait plus capable de mettre à jour les appareils et ça pourrait faire en sorte qu'ils sont incapables d'exercer leur travail.
Oui, mais ça pourrait faire augmenter la facture encore plus, là, parce que c'est ce qui est arrivé par le passé.
Bien là, écoutez, c'est dur de plus augmenter la facture que de doubler le coût. On est rendu à plus que 34 milliards de dollars pour un programme qui était supposé de coûter 19 milliards de dollars. Regardons les alternatives qui peuvent être moins coûteuses, soit à l'achat ou à l'entretien, et qu'en plus, on pourrait avoir des garanties de construction de ces appareils-là sur le sol canadien pour créer des emplois ici chez nous.
Donc, c'est bien pour abandonner donc, le programme des F-35.
Pendant la campagne électorale, c'est ce qu'on avait dit. Nous, on pense que, écoutez, il y a des avions qu'on a déjà achetés qui vont être livrés. On ne peut pas revenir en arrière là-dessus. Mais pour le reste, il faut abandonner ce programme-là qui est trop coûteux et qui met en cause également notre souveraineté.
There's two pieces of legislation in the House right now, the border bill and the fast tracking projects bill. Can you just say how does the NDP plan to vote on both those two bills?
Well, we'll be discussing both bills at our caucus meeting tomorrow. They were just tabled, as you know, last week. I mean, already there's some concerns that have been raised about both bills, and we'll be having a thorough discussion with the critics and our caucus tomorrow. So there'll be more news on that in the days ahead.
What concerns particularly stand out to yourself and your colleagues?
Well, on C5, for example, there's some legitimate questions about how the fast tracking of one project may impact Indigenous consultation and constitutional rights. As we know that, you know, if you don't respect Indigenous rights to free, prior, and informed consent, you risk litigation, and that ties up projects. So unless that issue is really well thought out, and it doesn't appear that it has been, that's one concern, for instance, that's been raised.
On defense spending, where does the NDP stand on the $9 billion that the Liberals have proposed? Is that something you guys would support going forward?
Well, during the campaign, we did agree that we would meet the 2% NATO target of GDP. I had a conversation last night with the Minister of Defense, Mr. McGuinty, and according to their numbers, the $9 billion would bring us up to the 2% level. You know, I think there's defense spending that has social utility and defense spending that does not. And what we're looking for are investments in the Canadian Armed Forces that not only will give our forces the kind of equipment and standard of living that they deserve, which has long been ignored, but also provides Canadians with utility. For an example, you know, making sure that we have the equipment for disaster relief is something that not only is something that counts toward our 2%, but also is something that I think will be able to be put to good use in provinces and territories across the country.
But the goalposts are likely to move now. 2% is the goal now. We've heard from the head of NATO that it would be up to 5%. Would that be something you could support? We've done the math. It's roughly $93 billion additionally a year to get to 5%.
All we've spoken about and committed to on the NDP is meeting the 2% target, and that's where we're at now.
On the Auditor General's reports, especially on ArriveCan and the F-35, what did you think of them?
Well, boondoggle and incompetence. You know, I don't think you can call the F-35 anything but that. As my colleague stated so eloquently, you know, the price is double. We don't have enough pilots for them. We don't have hangar space for them. And it risks integrating more closely into the American military at a time when Prime Minister Carney campaigned against that very thing. So I think the whole program has been mismanaged. I think it's time that we actually take a second look at alternatives in that regard. With respect to the ArriveCan app, I mean, that's another failure of government management. From what I understand, the government itself did not apply its own procurement and security rules. And that resulted in overspending of millions of dollars. Frankly, I think it's a scandal. It's a waste of taxpayer dollars, and the Liberals have a lot to answer for.
But it goes beyond ArriveCan. It's a number of different contracts for like 31 different departments and agencies.
Yeah. No, you're right, and that speaks to a systemic problem which is far more disturbing than just ArriveCan. You know, maybe this is just the tip of the iceberg here, and we'll need to look into that in more detail. But I think it also speaks to the increasing use by Liberal and Conservative governments of outside consultants under the guise of saving money when it costs us far more money. This is work that could and should be done by our public service. And, you know, as the PBO said last week, there's no way that the Liberal numbers will add up without severe cuts to the public service. So this is the kind of financial, I think, misinformation that needs to be clarified by a budget, and why we do support, as New Democrats, a budget. You know, this House last sat in December. The last fiscal update was last December. If this government waits until the fall for a budget, Canada, G7 country, will have gone 10 months without a single sort of fiscal document, not a fiscal update, not a budget. That's not acceptable. It's not transparent, and New Democrats calling the government to address that.
How the MPs going to vote on supplementary estimates? There's no budget, so the supplementary includes that $9 billion in defense. So will you vote in favor of it?
Yeah, again, we haven't made a final decision on that, but the supplementary estimates carry over spending that is from last Parliament and includes spending on things like dental care and pharmacare and additional supports for Canadians. So that is something easier for us to support than, say, the throne speech, which talks about the economic plans going forward, which we don't find persuasive or supportable.
Why did no one from the New Democrats stand up in the House of Commons when the throne speech vote was brought forward?
Am I glad you asked that? Am I glad you asked that? More confusion has been, because you have to be a member of a recognized party to stand up and call for a recorded vote. So it was actually the Liberals, Conservatives, and Bloc who did not want a recorded vote. New Democrats said we were going to vote against it. We stood willing and able to do it. It's just the other parties deprived us of that opportunity. So it wasn't because the New Democrats didn't want a standing vote. It's because the other parties didn't want it, and we didn't have the power to change that.
Have you heard anything more in committees? How is caucus morale when you bring that up and you're kind of in these few weeks that you've had as a caucus of 7? I mean, how does that hurt morale when you're not even able to request that vote?
Well, first of all, our caucus was united in our position on the throne speech. All of us want to take the same position. It's a little bit frustrating, you know. I mean, the rules are made in this place, and we think that full democracy should allow anybody to stand up and say that we want everybody to stand in their place and tell Canadians how they're voting. And so, you know, New Democrats are disappointed that didn't happen.
Have you gotten an update on committees?
Sorry, thanks very much.